The late afternoon sun baked the concrete, turning the sidewalk into a griddle. The heat rose in shimmering waves, distorting the view of the city across the street. For most people hurrying by, it was just another hot day in the city, a minor inconvenience before reaching an air-conditioned office or home. But for the woman sitting with her back pressed against the cool, rough brick of a storefront, the heat was just another layer in the heavy blanket she carried every single day. Her name was Elena, and she was trying to become invisible. It was a skill she was getting better at each passing week. She learned to hunch her shoulders just so, to keep her eyes downcast, to make the small space she occupied feel even smaller. Her world had shrunk to the 3 feet of sidewalk beneath a faded green awning that offered little relief from the sun. Beside her, her son Leo was lost in his own world. He was 6 years old, and his world was currently contained within the pages of a tattered spiral notebook. A worn-down nub of a blue crayon moved furiously across a page, filling it with scribbles of superheroes and fantastical creatures. The scratching sound was the only consistent, peaceful noise in her chaotic life. Elena watched him, her heart aching with a love so fierce it was almost painful. He was the reason she was here, the reason she got up every morning. He was also her greatest worry. She smoothed his dark hair away from his forehead, her fingers gently tracing the familiar shape. He didn't look up, completely absorbed in his creation. In his notebook, they weren't on a sidewalk. They were flying, they were fighting monsters, they were safe. She wished she could climb into that notebook with him. Their life hadn't always been like this. It felt like a lifetime ago, but it was really only a couple of months. She could still almost feel the phantom sensation of keys in her hand, the specific weight of the key to their small apartment. She remembered the smell of laundry detergent in the closet, and the way the morning sun would stream through the kitchen window. It all fell apart so fast. One missed paycheck because of a bad flu, then another. The warnings from the landlord. The final, crushing notice taped to their door. The shame of packing their lives into 2 oversized backpacks and a single, battered suitcase with a broken wheel. The wheel made a rhythmic, pathetic thump scrape on the pavement as they'd walked away from their home for the last time. A sound that echoed in her dreams. Now, their entire world was packed into those bags, tucked neatly beside her. She kept everything organized, a small act of defiance against the chaos of their situation. Clothes were folded, even if they were worn thin. Cans of food were stacked carefully. It was important to her that it didn't look like they had given up, even though some days she felt like she had a river of legs and shoes flowed past her. Expensive heels, scuffed sneakers, polished work shoes. 1,000 pairs of eyes would slide over her, then away, as if she were a crack in the pavement to be stepped over and forgotten. Sometimes she would catch someone's gaze for a split second, before they quickly looked down at their phone or suddenly found something fascinating across the street. She understood. It was uncomfortable. Seeing her made people think about things they didn't want to think about. It was easier to pretend she wasn't there. Leaning against the wall next to her was a small, hand-lettered piece of cardboard. The words were written in black marker, her handwriting neat and careful. Single mother. Anything helps, God bless. She hated the sign. It felt like a failure, a public announcement of her inability to provide for her son. But it was also necessary. Some days it brought in a few dollars, enough for a hot meal or a bottle of water. Other days it was just a piece of cardboard. Leo suddenly put his crayon down and looked up at her, his eyes wide and clear. "Mama, look," he said, his voice full of pride. He turned the notebook around to show her his latest drawing. It was a caped hero, flying through the air over a city of tall buildings. In the hero's arms he was carrying a smaller figure. "That's you and me," Leo explained, pointing. "He's taken us to our new house in the sky?" Elena's vision blurred with tears. She quickly blinked away. She couldn't let him see her cry. She had to be strong for him. "It's the best drawing yet, my love," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "He's very strong." "He's stronger than the sad monster," Leo said seriously, before turning back to his notebook to add more details. "The sad monster. That's what he called her bad days. The days when the weight of it all became too much, and she couldn't hide the sadness on her face. Her heart felt like it was being squeezed in a fist. Her son, her beautiful, innocent boy, was drawing pictures of superheroes to save them from a sadness no child should ever have to understand. A man in a business suit, talking loudly on his phone, walked so close he almost kicked Leo's backpack. He didn't notice, didn't apologize, just kept walking, his voice booming about quarterly reports and profit margins. Elena instinctively pulled Leo a little closer, wrapping her arm around his small frame. It was a constant, low-level state of alertness, a mother's instinct on high alert. Every passing stranger was a potential threat. Every sudden noise made her flinch. The smell of roasting nuts from a street vendor a few yards away wafted over them, and her stomach rumbled. It had been since morning that they'd shared a granola bar. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a few crumpled dollar bills and some change. She counted it twice. $4.37. Not enough for the nuts. It would have to be something from the convenience store a block away. A pack of crackers, maybe. Or a small carton of milk for Leo. She always fed him first dot as she was about to suggest they take a little walk. Leo looked up at her again, his crayon paused midair. His question was simple, innocent, and it landed like a punch to her gut. "Mama," he asked softly, his eyes searching hers. "When are we going home?" The question hung in the air between them, heavy and sharp. The city sounds seemed to fade away, and all she could hear was the frantic beating of her own heart. Home. The word was a ghost. She looked at her son's hopeful face and realized, with a sickening lurch, that she was out of answers. The reassurances she had been giving him for weeks. Soon. "Sweetie, we're just on an adventure. We're looking for a new, better place," felt thin and hollow, even to her. She saw in his eyes that he was starting to know it, too. She opened her mouth to say something, anything, but no words came out. She just pulled him into a tight hug, burying her face in his hair, and fought the overwhelming urge to just break down right there on the sidewalk. She held him tight, the small, warm body of her son, the only anchor she had in a world that had become a storm. She could feel his little heart beating against hers, a steady, rhythmic drum that reminded her of what she was fighting for. She took a deep, shaky breath, the air thick with the smell of exhaust fumes and street food. She had to be the grown-up. She had to be the superhero Leo saw in his drawings. She pulled back just enough to look at his face, forcing a smile that felt like it might crack. "Soon, my love," she whispered, the words tasting like ash in her mouth. "We're going to find a wonderful new place. I promise." It was a lie, or at least a hope so fragile it was practically a lie, but it was all she had. Leo seemed to accept it, or maybe he just wanted to because he gave a small nod and picked up his crayon again, his brow furrowed in concentration as he added a cape to the smaller figure in the drawing. Elena watched him, her own heart a heavy stone in her chest. She felt so incredibly alone, a tiny island of despair in an ocean of people who didn't even see her. The city's rhythm continued around them, a relentless beat of footsteps, car horns, and distant sirens. A group of teenagers walked by, their laughter loud and sharp. One of them glanced at her sign and then at Leo, and his laughter faded, replaced by a look of pity that was almost worse than being ignored. Elena looked down, her cheeks burning with a shame that had become her constant companion. She was used to it, but it never got easier. It was 1,000 little cuts every single day, then something changed in the flow of the human river. A figure broke away from the current, moving with a purpose that was different from the hurried commuters. At first, Elena didn't pay much attention. People sometimes cut across the sidewalk to get to a store or a bus stop. But this person wasn't heading for a door. He was slowing down. His footsteps, which had been a steady, even pace, became softer, more deliberate. He was getting closer, Elena's body tensed. Her shoulders went up, her muscles coiling like a spring. It was an automatic, defensive reaction. She pulled Leo's notebook a little closer, her hand resting protectively on his back. Here it comes, she thought. The condescending question, the unwanted advice, the rude comment. Or worse, the person who would try to preach to her or take her picture without asking. She braced herself, her eyes fixed on the cracked pavement in front of her, wishing she could just melt into the concrete. The footsteps stopped right in front of them. The shadow that fell over them wasn't the quick passing shadow of a stranger, but a solid, unmoving presence. Elena could feel the person looking at them. She didn't dare look up. She could smell a faint, clean scent like fresh laundry and soap, a smell that felt completely out of place on the dirty sidewalk. It was a smell from another world, the world she used to live in. For a long moment, there was only silence. The man didn't say anything. He just stood there. Elena's heart was pounding against her ribs. What was he doing? Was he just staring? The suspense was worse than the confrontation. She could feel Leo shift beside her, sensing the tension, then voice spoke. It was quiet, a little rough around the edges, but gentle. It wasn't loud or demanding. It was just a simple, calm sound in the middle of the city noise. "Hi," the voice said. Elena didn't move. She kept her head down, hoping he would just go away. The voice spoke again, this time directed not at her, but at the small boy beside her. "I like your drawing." That was unexpected. It wasn't about money or a job or a sermon. It was about Leo's drawing. Elena's head snapped up before she could stop herself. Her eyes met the gaze of the man standing over them. He was dressed simply in a dark hoodie and a worn baseball cap, the shadow of the brim hiding most of his face. But she saw his eyes. They were kind, and they were looking right at Leo's notebook with genuine interest. Then, she looked closer at the face under the cap. The familiar lines of his jaw, the shape of his nose, the serious set of his mouth. It couldn't be. It was impossible. Her mind refused to accept what her eyes were telling her. She had seen that face on a giant screen at the movie theater just a few months ago, on a poster in the subway station, on the cover of a magazine in a grocery store checkout line. It was him. It was really him. What was he doing here? Why was he talking to them? Her mouth fell open slightly, but no sound came out. Her brain was a jumble of confusion and disbelief. This had to be a dream. A strange, sun-baked, sidewalk dream. The man seemed to sense her shock. He gave a small, almost shy smile and crouched down, bringing himself to Leo's level. It was a simple movement, but it was incredibly disarming. He wasn't towering over them. He was on their level, on the sidewalk with them. "What are you drawing?" he asked Leo, his voice soft. Leo, who had been staring with wide-eyed wonder, finally found his voice. He was too young to be truly starstruck, but he knew this was someone important. "It's a superhero," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "A superhero, huh?" the man said, leaning closer to look at the page. "He looks very strong." "Who is he?" "He's taken us to our new house in the sky," Leo explained, his shyness slowly being replaced by pride. The man nodded, his expression serious, as if this were the most important plan he had ever heard. "That's a very important mission," he said. "You need a strong guy for that." He pointed to the figure. "I like his cape." Elena just watched, completely mesmerized. She felt like she was watching a scene from a movie, except it was happening right here to her. This famous, wealthy man was sitting on the dirty sidewalk, complimenting her son's crayon drawing. There was no camera, no director, no script. There was just the three of them, the setting sun, and the sound of the city. The man looked up from the notebook and met Elena's gaze again. His eyes were so kind, so full of an empathy that she hadn't seen from anyone in months. There was no pity in his eyes, which was what she dreaded most. There was just, understanding. "Are you hungry?" he asked her, his voice still gentle. "I was just about to grab a slice of pizza. My treat." Elena's mind was reeling. Pizza. The thought of it, of hot, cheesy, real food, made her stomach ache with longing. But she couldn't. She just couldn't. "Oh, no, you don't have to do that," she stammered, shaking her head. "We're okay, really." He didn't argue. He didn't push. He just stood up slowly. "I'll be right back," he said, and then he turned and walked toward the small pizza place on the corner. Elena watched him go, her heart thumping. Was he really coming back? Or was this some strange, elaborate joke? She looked at Leo, who was staring after him with a look of pure adoration. She felt a flicker of something she hadn't felt in a very long time: hope. It was a tiny, dangerous spark, but it was there. She held her breath and waited. She held her breath, her eyes fixed on the corner where he had disappeared. Every second stretched into an eternity. The city sounds, which she had learned to tune out, came rushing back in a noisy wave. A car alarm blared somewhere down the street. A woman laughed a loud, sharp laugh. The world was still moving, still indifferent. She felt a familiar pang of foolishness. Of course he wasn't coming back. Why would he? He was probably just being polite, a momentary impulse of pity that had already faded as he walked away. She had been a spectacle, a brief detour from his normal life. She looked down at Leo, who was still staring at the empty corner, his face a mask of hopeful confusion. Her heart ached for him. She would have to be the one to tell him that sometimes people don't come back, but then she saw him. He rounded the corner and he wasn't empty-handed. He was carrying 2 large, flat cardboard boxes, the kind that hold pizzas. The smell hit her first, a wave of warm, savory air that made her stomach clench with a hunger so powerful it almost brought tears to her eyes. It was the smell of melted cheese, baked dough, and oregano. It was the smell of normal life, of Friday nights, of comfort. He wasn't just carrying 1 box. He was carrying 2. And tucked under his arm were 2 bottles of water. He walked back toward them, his pace still steady and calm. He didn't look like a celebrity doing a good deed. He looked like a guy bringing home dinner. As he got closer, Elena's mind raced. What was she supposed to do? Say thank you? What if people were watching? What if someone took a picture? A knot of anxiety tightened in her stomach, a familiar feeling. But underneath it, a stronger feeling was growing, a desperate, knowing hope. He stopped in front of them again and crouched down, carefully placing the pizza boxes on the sidewalk. I wasn't sure what you'd like, he said, his voice quiet. So I got 1 pepperoni and 1 plain cheese. He then set the bottles of water down. And some water. It's pretty hot today. Elena just stared at the boxes, then at him, then back at the boxes. She was speechless. It was too much. It was an abundance of kindness she had no idea how to process. You didn't have to. I don't. She stammered, the words getting tangled in her throat. He just smiled that same small, shy smile. It's no problem. I was hungry anyway. He opened one of the boxes and the smell intensified. The cheese was perfectly melted, glistening under the red paper lights of the pizzeria sign. He pulled out a slice, the cheese stretching in a long, delicious string. He didn't hand it to her. Instead, he held it out to Leo. For the superhero artist, he said. Leo's eyes went wide. He looked at his mom, as if asking for permission. Elena gave a tiny, almost imperceptible nod. Leo took the slice with both hands, his small fingers sinking into the warm crust. He took a bite, and a little bit of sauce smeared his cheek. His eyes closed in pure bliss. It was the first time in months Elena had seen him look so completely, unapologetically happy. The man then took out a slice for himself and sat down on the sidewalk right across from them. He didn't hesitate. He just folded his long legs and settled onto the concrete, leaning back against the wall opposite theirs as if it were the most natural thing in the world. He took a bite of his own pizza. Elena was frozen. This was the part she didn't understand. He had given them the food. Why was he staying? People who gave things didn't stay. They handed over $1 or a bit of food and walked away, feeling good about themselves, leaving her alone again. But he was staying. He was sharing a meal with them. He looked up at her, noticing she hadn't taken a slice. Please, he said, gesturing to the open box. Eat, it's much better hot. Slowly, hesitantly, Elena reached into the box and pulled out a slice of the cheese pizza. It felt warm and heavy in her hand. She brought it to her lips and took a small bite. The flavor exploded in her mouth. It was so good, so intensely good, that it was almost painful. She hadn't tasted anything like it in what felt like a lifetime. She closed her eyes for a second, just savoring it. When she opened them, he was watching her, a gentle understanding in his eyes. He wasn't staring at her like a zoo animal. He was just sharing a moment. They ate in a comfortable silence for a few minutes. The only sounds the soft chewing and the distant city hum. Leo devoured his first slice and started on a second, his energy returning, his feet swinging happily. The man opened one of the water bottles and handed it to Elena. "Here," he said. She took it, her fingers brushing against his for a brief second. The cold plastic felt real and solid in her hand. She took a long drink, the cool water a relief against her dry throat. "So," the man said, breaking the silence. He looked at Leo's notebook, which was lying open on the sidewalk. "Besides saving the day, what else does this superhero do?" Leo, now much more confident with a belly full of pizza, launched into an elaborate explanation. "He can fly super fast, faster than a rocket, and he can see through walls, but only if it's for a good reason. And his favorite food is tacos, but he also really likes pizza." He gestured with his half-eaten slice. The man listened to every word, nodding seriously. "Tacos are a very important food for a superhero," he agreed. "Gives you strength." Elena watched them, a feeling of warmth spreading through her chest that had nothing to do with the pizza. She was seeing her son come alive again. The shyness and the quietness that had settled over him in the past few months were melting away, replaced by the chatty, imaginative boy she knew. This man, this stranger, this celebrity was giving her son back to her. If only for a few minutes, she felt herself relax for the first time and she couldn't remember how long. The constant knot of tension in her shoulders loosened just a little. She took another bite of her pizza, this time tasting it fully, without the edge of desperation. She looked at the man sitting across from her. He had finished his slice and was just leaning against the wall, watching Leo with a soft expression. He wasn't on his phone. He wasn't looking at his watch. He was just there, present. She realized she had stopped thinking of him as the famous actor. He was just a man, a kind man who had bought them dinner and was now sitting on a dirty sidewalk to keep them company. She felt a wave of something so powerful it almost knocked the breath out of her. It wasn't pity or shame. It was gratitude. A deep, soul-shaking gratitude that made her eyes well up with tears. She quickly blinked them back, not wanting him to see her cry. She didn't want to make this about her sadness. This moment felt too precious for that. He seemed to sense her change in mood. He looked over at her, his gaze kind and unwavering. "It's a good drawing," he said again, as if reading her mind. "You've got a talented kid there." Elena finally found her voice, and it was steadier than she expected. "He is," she said, a genuine smile touching her lips for the first time that day. "He's the best." The man smiled back, and in that moment the last of the walls between them crumbled. They were no longer a celebrity and a homeless woman. They were just two adults, sitting on a sidewalk, watching a little boy eat pizza and talk about superheroes, sharing a small pocket of peace in the middle of a chaotic city. The last slice of pizza was gone, but the warmth it created inside them lingered. The city was beginning to change. The harsh light of the afternoon had softened into a gentle golden glow as the sun started to dip behind the tall buildings. Streetlights began to flicker on, casting long, dancing shadows on the pavement. The air was cooling down, and a gentle breeze rustled the discarded newspaper near their feet. For the first time in a very long time, Elena felt a sense of peace. It was a fragile, delicate thing, like a soap bubble, but it was there. She watched as Leo took a long drink from his water bottle, a happy, contented sigh escaping his lips. He was no longer the quiet, withdrawn boy from an hour ago. The pizza and the kind attention had worked a small miracle. The man sitting across from them had finished his slice, too. He leaned back against the brick wall, his arms resting on his knees, just watching the city wake up for the evening. He seemed completely comfortable there, as if the hard concrete was a soft couch. He wasn't in a hurry. He wasn't looking for an escape. He was just present. Elena found herself studying him, trying to understand. Why was he doing this? What did he want? She couldn't find a single trace of pity or condescension in his demeanor. He was just a person who had seen another person in need and had decided to sit with them for a while. He turned his head and his eyes met hers. The gentle look was still there, but now it was mixed with something else, a deeper kind of seriousness. He didn't smile this time. He just held her gaze, and she felt that he could see right through all her walls, all her pretenses, right down to the scared, tired woman underneath. "Can I ask you something?" he said, his voice still soft, but now with a weight to it. Elena's heart gave a little flutter of anxiety. The moment was broken. The bubble was about to pop. She nodded, not trusting her voice. He paused for a second, as if choosing his words carefully. "Do you have a place to stay tonight?" The question hit her like a physical blow. All the shame and fear she had managed to push aside for the last hour came rushing back in a cold wave. This was the question she dreaded, the one that defined her reality. Her eyes fell to her hands, which were twisting in her lap. She couldn't look at him. She couldn't bear to see the look in his eyes when she told him the truth. Her throat felt tight, and when she finally spoke, her voice was barely a whisper. "No," she said. The single word hung in the air, full of failure and despair. We usually find a spot. A doorway. Somewhere out of the way." She couldn't bring herself to look at Leo, who was now listening intently. His happy expression fading, there was a long silence. Elena braced herself for the next question. "How did you end up here?" Or the well-meaning but useless advice. "You should go to a shelter." She had heard it all before. But the man didn't say any of those things. He just said, "Okay, 1 second." He pulled a simple, black phone from his pocket. It wasn't a fancy new model, just a regular phone. He stood up and walked a few feet away, turning his back to them. He put the phone to his ear and began to speak in low, urgent tones. Elena couldn't make out the words, just the murmur of his voice. She watched him, her heart pounding. What was he doing? Calling the police? Calling some service to come pick them up? A fresh wave of anxiety washed over her. Leo tugged on her sleeve. "Mom, who is he calling?" He whispered, his eyes wide with a mix of fear and curiosity. "I don't know, sweetie," Elena whispered back, pulling him into a hug. "It's okay. Just wait." The conversation didn't last long. The man said a few more things, then a simple, "Thank you," and ended the call. He slid the phone back into his pocket and walked back toward them. As he got closer, Elena saw that his expression was calm, determined. He knelt down in front of them again, bringing his eyes level with theirs. "I have a friend who runs a family shelter a few miles from here," he said, his voice clear and direct. "It's a good place, clean, safe." He looked at Elena. "They have a private room available for you and your son. They have beds, hot showers, and they serve breakfast in the morning. The people there are nice. They can help you too. They have resources to help you find a job, a more permanent place to live. If you want to go, I can take you there right now." Elena just stared at him, her mind struggling to process what he was saying. A shelter. A private room, help. It was everything she had been dreaming of. Everything she had been too scared and too overwhelmed to find on her own. It wasn't just a handout. It was a solution. It was a lifeline. The tears she had been fighting back all day finally broke free, but these were not tears of sadness or shame. They were tears of pure, overwhelming relief. They streamed down her face, and she couldn't stop them. She didn't even try. She just nodded, unable to speak, the sobs shaking her body. The man didn't flinch. He didn't look away. He just waited patiently, giving her the space to feel her emotions. He reached out and gently placed a hand on her shoulder. It was a light, reassuring touch, but it felt like it was holding her up. "Okay," he said softly. "Okay, we'll go." But he wasn't done. He reached into his back pocket and pulled out a worn leather wallet. He opened it and took out a thick stack of bills. Elena's eyes widened. It was more money than she had seen in a year. He held it out to her. "This is for you," he said, his voice firm but kind. "To get you started. Buy your son some new clothes. Get some things you need. Don't worry about it. Just take it." Elena shook her head, her hands flying up as if to push it away. "No, I can't," she sobbed. "You've already done too much. I can't take this." Yes, you can, he said, his voice leaving no room for argument. He took her hand and gently pressed the money into her palm, closing her fingers around it. There's only one condition, he added, a hint of a smile returning to his face. Pay it forward someday. When you're back on your feet and you see someone who needs help, you help them. That's all. Elena looked down at the money in her hand, then back at his face. She nodded again, the words catching in her throat. I will, she finally managed to choke out. I promise. He then looked over at Leo, who was watching the whole exchange with wide, silent eyes. The little boy had a smear of pizza sauce on his cheek and his mother's tears on his own face. The man noticed that Leo was starting to shiver in the cool evening air. Without a word, he stood up and shrugged off his own jacket. It was a simple, dark leather jacket, worn and soft from years of use. He knelt down and draped it over Leo's small shoulders. The jacket was huge on him, the sleeves hanging way past his hands, but the boy immediately snuggled into it, wrapping it around himself like a warm hug. It was more than a jacket. It was a shield. It was a symbol of protection. By now, a few people had stopped to watch the quiet drama unfolding on the sidewalk. A young woman with an apron from the coffee shop next door had been watching from her doorway. Her eyes were glistening. She disappeared inside for a moment and then came back out, carrying 2 steaming cups. She walked over cautiously. I'm sorry to interrupt, she said softly, her voice full of emotion. But I thought you might like these. She held out the cups. Hot chocolate? For the little guy and his mom? Elena looked up at the barista, her face streaked with tears, and took the cups. Thank you, she whispered. The man just gave the barista a grateful nod. The kindness was spreading, a ripple effect in the small corner of the city. He helped Elena to her feet, then helped her gather their bags. He picked up Leo's notebook and crayon, handing them to the boy, who was now swimming in the leather jacket. He slung one of Elena's heavy backpacks over his own shoulder, his strength making the bag look light. Ready? He asked, looking at Elena. She looked at her son, warm and fed and wrapped in a hero's jacket. She looked at the kind man who had seen them and had chosen to act. She looked at the steaming cup of hot chocolate in her hand, a gift from a stranger. She took a deep breath, the air feeling different now, cleaner, full of possibility. The weight on her shoulders was still there, but it was lighter now. For the first time in months, she wasn't just surviving. She was about to start living again. She nodded, a real, strong nod this time. Yes, she said, her voice clear and steady. We're ready. The walk to the car was short, but it felt like crossing into another world. He led them to a simple, dark-colored sedan that was parked a block away. It was clean and ordinary, nothing flashy. He opened the back door for Elena and Leo. Elena hesitated for a moment, feeling a wave of self-consciousness. She was dirty, her clothes were worn, and she was about to sit in this pristine car. But the man just stood there, holding the door open with a patient, expectant look, as if it were the most normal thing in the world. She took a deep breath and helped Leo climb in, then slid in beside him. The leather seats were cool and smooth against her skin. It was the most comfortable thing she had felt in months. He got in the driver's seat and started the car. The quiet hum of the engine was a soothing sound. He didn't turn on the radio. He just drove, navigating the city streets with a calm confidence. Elena sat in the back, holding Leo, who was already dozing off, his head resting on her shoulder, still wrapped in the big leather jacket. She watched the city lights blur past the window, a kaleidoscope of colors she hadn't truly noticed in a long time. For the first time, they didn't look threatening. They just looked like lights. She looked at the man's reflection in the rearview mirror. His eyes were focused on the road. He didn't try to make small talk. He didn't ask her any more questions. He just gave them the gift of quiet, a peaceful space to just be. She clutched the money in her pocket, the thick stack of bills feeling like a solid promise. She thought about his words, pay it forward someday. It wasn't a loan. It was an investment in her, a belief that she would get back on her feet. That belief was more valuable than the money itself. After about 20 minutes, he turned down a quieter street and pulled up in front of a large old brick building. It looked like a former school or a hospital. There was a small, simple sign by the door that read, "The Haven Family Center." He turned off the engine and turned around in his seat. "This is it," he said softly. He helped them out of the car and grabbed their bags. As they walked toward the entrance, the door opened and a woman with a warm, welcoming smile came out. She had kind eyes and her hair was pulled back in a gentle bun. "You must be Elena and Leo," she said, her voice as warm as her smile. "I'm Anna. We've been expecting you." "Come on in out of the cold?" Elena felt a wave of relief wash over her. There was no judgment in Anna's eyes, no paperwork or questions right away. Just welcome. They stepped inside into a brightly lit hallway. It smelled faintly of bleach and cinnamon. It was clean. Very clean. The floors were polished and the walls were painted a soft, calming yellow. It felt safe. Anna led them down the hall to a small room. "This will be your space for as long as you need it," she said, opening the door. Inside, there were 2 neatly made beds, a small dresser, and a window with a view of a small garden in the back. It was simple, but it was perfect. It was a private room. A lock on the door. A place where they could close out the world and just breathe. The man set their bags down by the door. He didn't come in too far, just stood at the threshold respecting their new space. He looked at Elena, and she saw that same gentle understanding in his eyes. "Anna will take good care of you," he said. He then looked at Leo, who was half asleep in his mother's arms. "Keep drawing, little man." He turned to leave, and Elena felt a panic rise in her chest. "Wait," she said, her voice cracking. "I don't even know your name." He paused at the door and turned back. He gave her that small, shy smile again. "That's not important," he said quietly. "Just take care of each other." And then he was gone? Elena stood in the middle of the room, holding her sleeping son, surrounded by a quiet she hadn't known in months. Anna came in and gently placed a folded set of clean pajamas and some toiletries on one of the beds. "There's a bathroom just down the hall if you'd like to get him settled," Anna said softly. "Take your time. We'll talk more in the morning. Just rest now." Elena nodded, tears of gratitude streaming down her face. She gently woke Leo just enough to change him into the clean, soft pajamas. She washed his face with a warm washcloth, cleaning away the last traces of the day. She tucked him into the bed and he was asleep again before his head hit the pillow, a small, peaceful smile on his face. She stood there, watching him sleep, her heart so full it felt like it might burst. She hung the man's leather jacket carefully in the small closet. It was a symbol of the day her life changed. A week later, their world was completely different. The money had been a lifeline. She had bought Leo new shoes, a warm coat, and a backpack full of new crayons and notebooks. She had bought herself a few pairs of jeans and some sturdy shirts. It wasn't about luxury. It was about dignity. The shelter was more than just a roof over their heads. Anna had connected her with a job counselor who was helping her update her resume. They had a plan. For the first time in a long time, the future wasn't a scary, dark cloud. It was a path, and she could see the first few steps on it. The story of their encounter didn't break on the nightly news. It started with a simple post on social media. The young barista from the coffee shop, so moved by what she had seen, had written about it. She didn't have any pictures. She just described what she witnessed: a famous actor sitting on a sidewalk, sharing pizza with a homeless mother and her son, treating them with a respect and kindness that brought her to tears. She ended the post with, "In a world full of bad news, I saw something today that restored my faith in humanity." The post was shared and then shared again. People were drawn to the simplicity and sincerity of the story. It wasn't about a celebrity doing a photo op. It felt real. Comments poured in by the thousands. "I'm literally crying at my desk. This is what being a hero is all about." He didn't just give them money, he gave them respect. The story became a beacon of light in a world that often felt dark and divided. People were moved not just by the generosity but by the quiet, human way it was done. Seeing the story spread, Elena felt a mix of emotions. She was worried about their privacy, but she also felt a powerful desire to share her side. to add her voice to the chorus of gratitude. With Anna's encouragement, she decided to speak out. She did a short, simple video interview with a local news outlet. In it, her voice was clear and steady. She spoke not of pity, but of profound gratitude. She talked about the man's kindness, the pizza, the jacket, the shelter. But most of all, she talked about how he saw her. He didn't see a homeless person. He saw a mother. He saw a person. He gave her back her dignity when she felt she had lost it completely. Her interview went viral too. The world saw her not as a victim in a story, but as a strong, resilient woman who had been given a chance and was ready to take it. The story became a testament to the idea that one act of compassion, done with no expectation of reward or recognition, can change a life. It reminded everyone that heroes don't always wear capes. Sometimes they just wear a simple hoodie and a baseball cap, and they take the time to ask a little boy about his drawing. And, in doing so, they can bring tears to the eyes of millions and inspire a world to be a little kinder, one person at a time.